Hey, this is William Tincup and Ryan Leary, and you're listening to the You Should Know podcast. Today we have Rebecca on, and we're going to talk about transparency at work. And we can't wait. This is going to be a podcast that's going to get a lot of downloads because no one's figured out transparency at work, turns out. Rebecca, would you do us a favor and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is
Sure.
Rebecca Trotsky, and I am the Chief People Officer for HR Acuity, which is an employee relations and case management solution that runs all the way from anonymous employee reporting capabilities where they can message back and forth anonymously with the HR partner who is investigating their concern, all the way to analytics and reporting and, cool data capabilities. And in between, we have our flagship investigation and case management and ER solution. And then we also have a manager solution because we know that managers are often the front line for hearing employee concerns, hearing allegations of misconduct. And so they need to be equipped to handle anything that should come up. So we have a full, all the way to, we call it through care, but after care, even after something has happened.
Right.
So
for the audience, when they hear solution, this is a mixture of software and
it is.
service layer.
We're a technology provider, but we are really proud of our employee relations community. It's called Empower. It has almost 5,000 members, and
cool.
It's free. So anybody listening who has a role in employee relations should join. It's empowerer.org. And we get a lot of insight and we understand what's happening in the world of employee relations from that community and from our roundtable community, which is our community of leaders. We get together with our leaders, about 100 of them in person once a year, and we do webinars and online conversations with them as well. So we're really steeped in what's happening in the world of employee relations, and we infuse that knowledge into our technology platform. And so that's why today I'm really excited to be talking about transparency, because this is something top of mind for everybody in our community and our clients.
It's interesting, Rebecca, pre-COVID, I think 1 in 100 people would have known what employee relations was, even inside their company, but because of COVID and because of the communication layer of all layers of COVID, I think those professionals finally got their due. Finally got recognized for the hard work that they do. And also there's a heavy burnout of all of that stuff. So there's good and bad to that.
Right. So we found that our employee relations professionals really had to step up and step into the limelight, so to speak. Oftentimes that group likes to help people and solve problems kind of maybe under the radar. We don't think
100%.
That's good for them. We want us to be loud and proud about what we're doing. And we'll get to the transparency piece. But they had to step in and redesign everything from their, work from home policies to their masking policies to their vaccine policies and how do you enforce it, and now return to work or hybrid work. They got, the employee relations teams got a lot of love, I think, during that time. But yes, also it took a toll. It was a lot to absorb. And if you remember, it was also George Floyd was murdered that summer. So there was a whole resurgence, right? So they had to deal with social justice movements, coming up strongly again. It was a lot. And so we found that since then, I wouldn't say things have calmed down or slowed down from a COVID standpoint. Yes, but there are so many other things stepping in. It's still the burnout. It's still mental health issues that we know employees are contending with. And then of course it gets back to trust and transparency as we'll talk about here.
I think, William, as you said, pre-pandemic, my mind immediately went to, if anyone ever mentioned employee relations, I thought there was trouble.
Correct.
Right? It was like employee relations equals IAB, internal affairs, right?
Right.
For SB,
it was the dark shadow, as we say.
Yes.
Well,
Now
could
they're
you grab your things and please come in the conference room?
might have happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's how, and I have a number of close friends that are in that area, and I'll tell you, like, even knowing what the role does, I still in my mind
Yeah.
feel like they're constantly the bad guy and they're always judging. They're the bad one. And I know that's not the case. I know that's
Yeah.
not the case.
Okay.
Oh,
Right. And so we're definitely trying to
Jeez.
change that.
Yeah.
So,
Rebecca's
we,
shooting lasers right through the camera at me.
no, but it's good. I'm glad because we know that there is this.
I'm being transparent
No,
here.
but right. This is good. I love the
Okay.
transparency. There is this sort of baggage to the
yes.
function of employee relations,
Yes.
which we believe and know is not well placed. It's not appropriate anymore because we know that employee relations professionals want to resolve issues. They want to take something that may have gone off course at work, and it could be something small, it could be something bigger, but they really care about making sure that that issue is resolved in a
Right.
way where it doesn't happen again. The person
Right.
can get back to work and contribute to the mission of the company and support the customers of the company or the organization and put it behind them so that the company benefits, the organization benefits, the employee benefits. So we're trying very hard to break free from that paradigm,
Yeah.
Ryan.
Yeah.
And it still is very hard. And one of my theories about this is that leaders of companies don't like to think that their people will cause issues or they will
Right.
have issues.
Sure.
Everybody wants to believe that everybody comes to work with the purest of intent every day and they're going to be able to do their work perfectly without kind of disruption. And we just know that that's not true. So you might as well just be
Yeah.
honest. Like we say, humans gonna human. It's okay. It's okay. If
Yeah.
you have people,
I love
you're
that
going to
saying.
have issues. Like
Human's
it's
gonna
okay.
human.
Yes. Like, and just be open about it and acknowledge that the goal isn't to have perfection. The goal is to resolve issues and
Right.
make the workplace continuously better.
Right.
Which again gets to transparency. If you're honest about your processes, if you're
Right.
clear about what is the role of employee relations, like, I mean, Ryan, you said you didn't even know, right? Or
I had
William,
no
you
clue.
said a lot
Yeah.
of people didn't even know what that is. I think a lot of people still don't. If you're clear about what happens if there is a concern or if there is one of those moments where things go a little bit off, even if it's something as simple as I need to take a leave of absence to care for a sick family member, which doesn't mean I've done anything wrong.
Right.
But I would like to know that my compensation will be handled fairly. If I'm on a commission plan, for example, what will happen to my quotas?
Right.
Will I be made whole or treated in a way where I can be successful when I return? And something as simple as the company saying, hey, we've got this. We know how to deal with this. We have a plan. We're going to tell you exactly what to expect. We're going to tell you what our process is. And here's what's going to happen. And then you have comfort. You can take your leave, care for your family member, come back, get right back to work. It's all very easy if it's been defined and if it's handled consistently. Right. It should be. Right.
Well, what are the, transparency is a word that I think people think that we've all agreed on what that means and that there's universal understanding of what is and isn't transparent or transparency. You're on top of this all the time. So what's the table stakes of transparency right now? Like, what are people's expectations when they come into an organization regarding this should just be transparent?
Yeah, I think it depends on your individual workforce. So I think asking what do you expect? What is your expectation as an employee of this organization? I think that's one element. However, I would say for basic things like, well, employee relations issues, if you really want your people to report a concern at work, something happened, misconduct happened. We know that from our workplace study that we did a year ago, 52% of people have experienced some form of misconduct. And
100%.
so if you would like your employees to share when that happens so that you can resolve it, then you need to be transparent about what happens. What's the process? How is it going to work? How will you deal with it if there is fear of retaliation or if there is some action that would signal that? So that's a piece of it, right? Like making sure that people understand what to expect. After the fact, I think it used to be back in the olden days, an HR
Which
person or an
now is
ER.
like 2003.
Right,
Yes, good
exactly.
point.
Right. Like
Good
20 years
point.
ago, not even. Oh my gosh,
The
scary.
aughts. What?
Yeah.
My kids say, like, you're from the 1900s. I'm like, oh,
Oh, yes.
I'm far
Yes.
back in the
Yeah.
1900s, but yeah.
Technically the 20th century, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. But we would never, for example, say that we would share an outcome of an investigation. And
Right.
even now, of course, you're going to make sure you're protecting the people who are involved so that you're not broadcasting, let's say, the discipline necessarily, although clearly if somebody isn't there anymore, they can draw their own conclusions as to what may or may not have happened.
Right.
But certainly you could, and we encourage organizations to aggregate data and share that, guess what? Sometimes we do substantiate issues and we are able to resolve them. And this is the percentage of the time. So maybe not all the time, but if you're transparent about what's happening in terms of how are you getting information? Are people anonymously reporting? Are they going to their managers? Are they going to HR? And then what's happening with those cases? You're going to get a lot more people who will come forward because they'll say, well, you know what? They actually do something. It's not a black hole where issues go to die. It is a place where we bring things into the light and we clean them up. And I feel better about that. And we have found in our workforce or workplace misconduct study that when employees had an issue that they reported, that was investigated, and it was resolved, they were 2.7 times more likely to recommend that employer as a good place to work to their friends, and much more likely to be still with the company, by the way. They're not going to quit because of that. But if you think about what that really means, it bonds them to the company in a way because they've been through a situation that's challenging. The company has stepped up and has taken action, and that person has been through that and feels better. And it's not unlike when you're a customer and something goes wrong as a customer and the company, gives you extra love and attention. And then you're like, I really like that business. I'm going to tell all my friends to go shop there. So it's a very similar dynamic, but it does involve being very clear and about your processes and about what happens when something should go wrong. So that's an element too.
When you run into the situation where you think the leadership team thinks that they're being transparent, but it's not meeting the needs of their employees. But they in their hearts feel like we're being transparent. We care about transparency. We are transparent. It's one of our values. We are transparent. But yet the people that work there don't share that definition or don't share that experience of transparency. How do you overcome that, or how do you get them to overcome that?
I think this is a case where technology is going to force our hands collectively. And you've seen things like Brittany Peach, who was laid off from Cloudflare and recorded her termination meeting.
Oh,
and it went viral. Okay.
It was awesome.
So that brings a level of transparency.
Yeah.
And if leadership teams would prefer that it's not done that way, perhaps they should make sure that they're being extra transparent and clear in how they're communicating and step up their game, so to speak, so that even if it's not going to go viral because it's not handled badly, right? Like if there's nothing to show, if there's no there, it's not going to go viral. You're not going to have bad headlines. You're going to protect your reputation. And so I think that in some ways, the forced transparency from our employees and our workforce that are saying we want more of this is going to help us. I mean, things like wage transparency laws in states were very scary to companies. They were like, we can't do this. But guess what? Like, companies have stepped up. They've done it. They cleaned up their house, right? They got everything in order. We haven't seen a lot of wage claims as a result. We've seen companies better able to articulate what they pay and why they pay it internally and externally. It's actually raised everyone's game.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably made HR and recruiting teams more efficient. You're not going back and forth at the last hour trying to figure out what you should pay this person. It's very clear up front.
Yeah, it's not the Wild West. The compensation team has put together kind of a straightforward approach of understanding, and they've communicated that with recruiters and hiring managers. And again, that wasn't being done before.
It
And
wasn't
so it
being done
was
before.
like the
Right.
Wild West.
Right. And so that is just an example of where there's something very simple that all it needs is a process that is adhered to consistently. It's the same thing in employee relations. Define the process, follow it consistently. That is what is going to engender trust from your employees. And if you do that in all aspects of your relationship with employees, you're going to be okay. And you can be transparent. If you have a process, what's wrong with sharing what it is?
What side, and I know there's different views here. I don't know that there should be different answers, but there might be. How much of this job, of the employee relations role, a claim comes through, you're investigating the claim, how much of their effort is to protect the employee, to investigate thoroughly, but ultimately protect
I love this
the
question.
employee as opposed to damage control for the company?
It's a who are you an advocate for? Are you an advocate for the company, or are you an advocate for the
And
employee?
I know you're kind of in the middle there, but I kind of feel like that's where the employee, or at least the employee says, well, retaliation or this and that, they're just going to be on the side of the company. How do you, one, where does that fall? Where does that liability fall? But two, how does a company or employee relations person overcome that?
Yeah, I don't even see it as an either or. And I don't think most good employee relations professionals or HR people, if they're the ones doing the investigation, would see it that way. I really see them as one and the same. So you cannot protect your organization if you are not protecting your people. Your people need to be safe at work. They need to be able to come to work and contribute fully. And if they're dealing with a lot of misconduct and nonsense, they can't do that. They're going to quit. And you want the issue to be resolved so that you can get ahead of it for next time. Find the root cause of whatever the misconduct was and solve it. And that's how you protect the company. You keep people focused on serving the customers of that enterprise. And you can't do that if you're only performing the act of, okay, I'm going to do damage control. You really have to do both. And I understand that a lot of employees feel nervous or concerned to raise an issue because they say, okay, it's just going to be, they're on the side of management. They're not going to care. This is why it's so important for organizations to put in place an anonymous reporting tool so that's actually welcoming and helpful and not sort of like going to the DMV and having your number lost in the ether. Because you can encourage people that way and show them that you're taking action, that you're not just there to make the problem be swept under the rug, that you genuinely want to help.
So employee relations, as I grew up through this process, there was a different clock, the resolution clock. They could do a really, really hearty investigation, talk to everybody, turn over every stone, etc. My gut tells me that clock's different now. Like if I do an anonymous claim and say my boss is sexually harassing me, and it's not a one-time thing, it's happening more frequently, it's happening weekly, etc. I need help. What's the expectation of resolution? Not just how fast they're going to get on the investigation and all that stuff. I'm sure that happens pretty quickly, but how fast or has that changed? I don't even want to assume that the clock's changed. Or that people's expectations have changed. I don't want to do that. But tell us a little bit about that.
I love this question. I would encourage all of your listeners who are interested to go download our benchmark study. We publish it once a year. We have the latest version will be out in May. And we ask this question and we track it over time. And we ask how long does it take to close or to get a case to resolution, depending on the complexity of the case. We know that a sexual harassment case or discrimination case is more complicated and probably is going to take longer than a, travel and expense case where somebody might have been engaging in shenanigans on their corporate card, for example.
Right.
And that, I mean, we do see fluctuations in all of these over years, but they tend to stay pretty constant. Like, it's going to take you between 2 and 4 weeks to close a sexual harassment or discrimination case. And
is that communicated back to the person, or is there?
Well, this is important to articulate. This, I mean, it's a great point. It should be. It should, when you're doing the initial discussion and hearing the claim, it's important to say, like, I'm taking this very seriously. There is a process here. This is what we're going to do. We also think it's important to keep the person apprised of where in the process things are. So it's not just like they share something, it feels scary to them, and then they hear nothing. So it's important to keep that, we call it through care, like keep that person apprised of exactly what's happening. Maybe not all of the details, but like we're looking at data, we're analyzing, we're talking to the people that you recommended we talk to. And so we know that it's important to do a thorough investigation. And so sometimes speed isn't necessarily correct, right? You want the person to believe that you came to the right conclusion, regardless. Maybe you substantiated it, maybe you don't, but if they believe and know that you took your time and did a great, thorough investigation, they're going to feel a lot better about that outcome.
Right. So I have a follow-up on sexual harassment. And again, please, I'm not the authority here, so please crush all my dreams.
I would never do that, William.
You should. You should. So in the 80s, when I kind of grew up in the workplace, sexual harassment wasn't an abstract concept. It was very cut and dry. I mean, extremely cut and dry. You could see it, you could smell it, you could taste it. It was just like easy to define. And I feel like sexual harassment is a bit more nuanced now, or can be a bit more nuanced. Now, first of all, I'm not in the workplace, so let me start there. That's just me looking from the outside in. What are you finding?
Humans gonna human.
Human being. Human.
You really wanted to think about William?
Yeah. Sadly, I would love to say to you, we have solved this through decades of amazing training, and people have evolved to understand what is appropriate.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no. We have found a shift in the venue. So, we are more remote now, and we know that things can happen remotely as well as in person, although our misconduct study showed that it was much more likely to be in office settings to occur.
It could also happen over devices, which we didn't have those things before. So things can happen in a different medium, which
text messages are incredibly powerful.
Right.
If you're investigating this claim, it's really a great thing to have those. But yeah, certainly things like microaggressions was not a concept in the 80s or 90s that we talked about, or that people would recognize. I think that, we might have said, oh, that feels wrong, but we wouldn't have necessarily known why. Now there is more of a vocabulary and there is more of an awareness, which is great because if employees know that something isn't right or is off and they can articulate that, they're much more likely to reach out to the anonymous line. And even if it's like, some of our clients call it a warm line, it's not a hotline, it's a warm line. I just have a question. Is this acceptable? I'm not saying I'm raising an issue, but help me. Am I off here?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
And that also gets to building trust and building transparency, saying, you know what, it's okay to reach out with these questions that are maybe not, a formal complaint.
Right. This is how it made me feel. If I can articulate this is how it made me feel, then again, not casting blame any way or another. It's just basically this is how it made me feel. thoughts?
Right.
Yeah,
And then we can advise.
Perception is important.
Right.
Right. And we can potentially nip it in the bud and take action before it becomes something much, much worse.
Yeah. So what happens then post investigation? We'll just stay on sexual harassment. So something, someone files a claim or puts a claim through. It gets investigated. It wasn't substantiated to the, I guess I probably just answered my own question. It was substantiated that yes, there was something, but is it is it always a fireable offense? If it's not, then how do these two people coexist and work together? And where do you come in? Or not you per se, but where does the organization then come
in? The employee relations people still have a relationship there.
Yeah, a lot of times cases like this are substantiated with something else. So maybe it wasn't found to be discriminatory harassment of some kind, but there was unprofessional conduct or bullying behavior, something like that. And we want to resolve that too. We want to take action to make sure that doesn't happen. So articulating what is in the policy, like what behavior goes against the company values, or is in the policy as unacceptable behavior. And then, of course, we have ER teams very closely aligned to HR business partners and, even L&D teams or leadership development to, jump in, provide some remedial training or organization development interventions to help navigate the conflict and to help make sure that these kinds of behaviors don't continue happening. Certainly documenting is something important. So a case management solution like HR Acuity would be great because then you've got it all documented. And if it happens again, that makes it a lot easier to take maybe stronger action. So I do think that staying close to the person who raised the issue and following up with some kind of aftercare, making sure that there is a strong monitoring program so that you can tell if the person potentially is being retaliated against even before they know. If you're watching to see, okay, what's happening with their pay increases or development opportunities, or are they applying for jobs and they're not getting them? Is there something happening in our system now where we can see with the data that there's a potential retaliation problem here? If organizations can get ahead of that, how powerful that is for encouraging people to come forward because they feel safe that they're not going to be retaliated against.
Well, it's bifurcated aftercare. It's just different. So for the person that made the claim and that felt a certain way to then make that claim, it's following up and doing everything you just said. And then it's the person that the claim was against and following up that aftercare with them to follow up that the training was actually done, that they're not doing it again, etc. So you can look at aftercare on both sides.
Absolutely.
Just a kind of a different treatment of that aftercare. Because you mentioned policy, what happens and what is how do the employment how do they deal with things that aren't explicitly stated in policy or the handbook? So when things happen that aren't covered,
right?
You
can't possibly cover every element of misbehavior.
Correct. So what? And again, you're going to say human's going to human. Okay, fair enough.
I won't say it again. You said it the third time.
I'm gonna put it on a T-shirt.
I was gonna say I'm pretty sure we're gonna have a shirt.
Oh,
we'll even put you on. We'll put the company name because that's pretty cool. I like
it.
But the thing is okay. You're right. Can't cover everything. Policies plural, and also the handbook can't cover everything. But something happens in the workplace, and they have to deal with it. So something then gets reported, and everyone looks at each other and goes, I don't have no idea. There's nothing to point to. So how do they deal with that?
Well, I would encourage organizations to make sure that they have clear values with behaviors that anchor them, overarching expectations of how we behave in the workplace. And you can cover a lot of ground with that. And you can make it pretty clear what is acceptable and not acceptable, even if you don't have a policy that is explicit against that particular action. And guess what? You might have to revise your policies. more frequently than you thought because of how rapidly things are changing in the working world. AI policies, for example, I know you've been talking about that on your podcast, and just recognizing where your organization is going and trends that are happening and being clear about that. But I think that, values, behaviors are really helpful.
Are you a believer in morality clauses? If you're a buyer or seller, we'll do the Motley Fool deal. Are you a buyer, seller? Where are you at on morality clauses?
I'd say
she's wiggling in her chair. I see her, right?
I think he just put her in a bad spot.
No.
Let's go to what is the hey, is it gonna fit with what the company is trying to achieve? Right? Does it fit with the company's overarching goals? And I mean, sure, I think it could work, but it depends on what organization.
I was pretty sure you were gonna start. Can you hear me now? Can you? Sorry.
Sorry. You cut out. My internet.
Yeah, not working.
So where or who in the organization is really responsible for transparency in the or building a transparent culture? My mind says, my common sense mind says leadership, but you can have some really bad leaders in an organization,
Did
right?
You say can?
Well, most, yeah. So, or at least there's that level of distrust from the employee population to the leadership. So I'm looking at employee relations, HR, people, employees, and then leadership. The employees are in the center. They're kind of afraid to go to the HR group, right? They definitely aren't going to go to leadership, and there's a distrust there. So who's responsible to kind of build that feeling of transparency and that warm, welcoming feeling?
Everyone.
Yeah, I think it is everyone. I think that leaders certainly have an obligation to be as transparent as they possibly can. And HR leadership should equip them to do that, should help them be able to articulate if it's about pay, if it's about changes happening in the business environment. HR should equip them to do that effectively and bolster them and give them the courage, but they need to be able to do that. That's their job. But it does involve some courage. It is a little bit outside of maybe what many leaders grew up with. And so it's a different expectation.
I don't know if it's as much courage for millennials and Gen Z, because they grew up with the internet and they grew up with an expectation around transparency that they're just not willing to tolerate. So they wouldn't even, I don't believe that they'd even consider it courage. They're just like, hey, this sucks.
Right.
And then they'd say this sucks. They wouldn't hold it to themselves.
That's true.
Have quiet meetings, etc. So I think failure, Ryan, for me, is when we say to HR, you own culture, or you own DEI, or you own transparency, because that's never going to work. One person or even a team of people can't own something as big as that. Like I hate that idea that like DEI is, Sally and Robert's responsibility. It's like, no, it isn't. It's everybody's.
No, it isn't. It's a business issue overall.
100%.
Yeah.
Should be. Yeah. So what, for the audience, because they'll see employee communications and they'll see employee relations. What is the similarity and dissimilarity of those two groups of folks? How do they work together, etc.?
Well, we think of employee relations as the function that's bringing the legal and emotional contract to life for the employer and the employee.
Right.
And nurturing the culture in, making sure at all levels, like team level, individual level, company level, organization level. And communications is certainly important to help articulate that mission and to share what we would say should be pretty transparent practices. So I think there's a great partnership that needs to occur there. And certainly employee relations professionals have to communicate regularly with the entire business. And again, not be in the dark shadows, just fixing things under the radar, but out loud and proud about issues they've solved, the data that they're seeing, trends that they're seeing. That's how they're going to get more credibility and build that trust with not just employees of the organization, but leadership as well. And so I think communications professionals can certainly help equip them to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
So I've got a question here around, well, I'm trying to be nice.
You don't need to be.
I feel like I've been bad this entire conversation, always bringing the negative up.
No,
but I love
it's fine.
HR
I love
people.
it. I love it.
I love HR people. They're just IAB inside the workplace. No, I'm kidding. Everyone's gonna hate me here. So of all the cases or all the investigations, and I don't know that this isn't fully aligned to the conversation, but out of all the investigations that you're seeing in the workplace, how do they stack up? Where is harassment cases, bullying cases top of the pack here? What are we looking at? I'm trying to get an idea of really what the cases are and how bad it is.
She's got stats.
I have last year's data. Yes.
Yeah,
we do see cases.
I got you covered.
Top 10.
Yeah, we do see cases coming back from. They sort of took a dive during the pandemic.
Yeah. Should we do a Dave Letterman play here and do the top 10? Yeah.
Top 10.
You know what? That's better than pulling out a PowerPoint. So good thing.
No,
I'd rather do a book.
So you're looking for the different things that happen and those that are reported. What are the top 3? What are the top 5? What's trending?
What's trending? There you go.
Yeah, we have well, let's see. Let me see.
It's always because I think we only hear about harassment cases and things like that, or retaliation.
I remember there was a period, Ryan, where we talked about sexual harassment. We had sexual harassment policies, and then we broadened that out to harassment policies, and sexual was a spoke of a much larger.
Well, yeah, we break it down into a different category. So for those of you who want to download the 7th annual, which is last year's, it's on page 26. But what we found was, and I should have known this off the top of my head because we talk about it all the time, but mental health issues are actually the number one issue that was investigated in 2022. We released this in 2023. Wow. We have not found that has changed, as just a little teaser for this year. And accommodation requests was coming in at number 2, which, if you think about what has been happening with return to office, that is also not surprising. And then it's the usual things like job performance, so helping navigate performance concerns or performance issues, and then unprofessional conduct, policy violations, discrimination. And then it's discrimination, bullying, non-sexual harassment, followed by sexual harassment, and then retaliation. And then after that, it's things like threat assessments, social media misuse, substance abuse, theft, workplace violence. Yeah,
it's really interesting. So that's really now. How did that compare? Just off the top of your head, how does that compare to pre-pandemic? Now that brings up another question.
We did not see the same number of mental health issues prior to the pandemic.
Or accommodations.
Or accommodations. Yeah. I think people have more courage now to come forward and say, I need this.
Right. There is less of a stigma, which is really good. It has meant that employee relations professionals have had to learn about mental health first aid, triage, figuring out if somebody needs help, what do they do, equipping managers to be effective if they suspect somebody's in a mental health crisis. We actually did an Empower webinar conversation with about 30 professionals just last week on this topic. We're going to have a follow-up. It was a really good conversation. Again, I encourage everybody to join Empower. It's a really great community because this is stuff that we never used to have to navigate, or we did, but it wasn't nearly as frequent.
Right. And there was taboo and all kinds of things shrouding it too. People mental health problems have been here since the beginning of time.
Right.
It's only in the last couple of years where people feel comfortable to say, "Here's my diagnoses. Here's the medicines that I'm taking, etc." Or
and I need an accommodation for that. And what if I'm on a performance plan? And now what do you do? How do you untangle all of this and do the right thing for the employee and the organization and hold them accountable, but also support them? really challenging work, which is why I just think that they're heroes.
Yeah, we've had recent some podcasts on neurodiverse talent, neurodivergent talent, and how what we do in HR and how we treat people in a very similar way, which is kind of the backbone of HR, is that we treat people methodically in a situation. Now you have neurodivergent talent that bust out of all of those things. They need different things from you. So it's like you can't treat people the same way. In fact, in doing so, you can't recruit, you can't retain, etc. So
exactly. It's not equitable if you're doing that. So what does equity really look like when
and you're not getting the best out of all of your people at that point either.
100%.
When you're not accommodating it. And I hear people saying it now. Everyone gets a participation trophy, but I don't think it's that situation. I think it's I think that's a lazy argument there.
Yeah.
What do you tell, like, transparency seems to me to be a goal that you never reach. Meaning the goal is to go towards that goal and get as far towards that goal, but by the time you reach that destination, the destination changes.
Possibly, but I would say be bold and try. I think we could do better. We have an example where one of our clients has been using Microsoft Copilot to take transcriptions of the investigations interviews that they do.
Right.
They do all of them on Teams. And so it automatically transcribes. And because it's Copilot, it's cordoned off within their own firewall, so it's not going out. But they are able to take the entire transcription, put it into a Word document. Copilot removes all of the noise, so to speak, consolidates it. And that person, his team, provides a transcription of every single interview that they do when there's an investigation, with witnesses, with the person who raises the claim, the subject of the investigation. And people in our community were horrified because we've had a debate for a long time about, do you record an interview or do you not? Do you just take notes? And then do you provide a summary of your notes, but then they might disagree with that? And he said, look, these are their words. I'm giving them their own words. And he said that what it did was it allowed for better investigations because people were not worrying about taking notes. They were listening to hear what the person said and then asking a question that made sense from a follow-up standpoint. So getting a better resolution. And they're able to not spend their weekends typing up interview notes that they took for this investigation to close the case. They can do it in a matter of seconds and then have a case report that then, of course, they go through and make sure it's correct. But that kind of bold, we're going to just go do transparency like this is the kind of thing that we need to see from our community and other business leaders so that we know what is the end state. To your point, William, like I wouldn't have thought of that. I mean, it was amazing to hear that. Oh, you're going to provide the transcript. Okay. That is radical transparency, but it makes sense.
Right. They can't do it in the U.S. Congress because the U.S. Congress has outlawed Microsoft Copilot. So they can't use it there. But I love the idea. The intention is pure.
Yeah,
the intention is great.
And not unlike pay equity, it raised the game. The pay transparency on job postings raised the game for recruiters and HR people and comp teams. And it does the same thing for ER professionals if we can be brave enough to do it. And then, I don't know, William, maybe we have to be even more transparent, but like you have to start.
Oh, yeah, no, I was more or less thinking it's a similar thing that I have in my head around diversity and inclusion. Do we ever actually reach the goal?
Good
and
point.
That's not the point.
Right.
The point isn't the point is just start and go in that direction. Forward.
Right.
And then
and learn what's important to your people. Learn what do they value? What do they want to know about? And how can you provide that to them while still, protecting people?
So, all right, last question for me. Ryan, you got one?
Oh, I was going to just do my last question. I'll let you go first.
Are you, Motley Fool, are you a buyer or seller of HR annual reports?
Oh, I'm a big, I mean, both. Can I be both?
Did you just say, oh?
I didn't,
She
I didn't
recalled.
I didn't expect that.
Oh.
I mean, obviously, no. Like, well, first of all, HR, I'm a big fan of ER sharing what they have done so that,
Right.
again, for transparency. I mean,
Right.
it seems so obvious to me. It's like, well, yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Data. Tell the story. Show your work. Show what you're
Right.
doing. Use that to justify getting additional resources or additional technology or additional headcount. Like, you're doing great stuff for your organization. You've got to share it.
Yeah.
Check.
I
But you did recall. That was some funny
I
stuff.
was like, I was surprised. Like,
I'm not
obviously.
I'm not going to ask another question. I think that's a perfect answer to end on. But I will say, if you're still listening, I hope you are, because this is a great conversation. Just make sure you like this, subscribe. You'll get more shows just like this. And Rebecca will give us all the links that we need for those reports. We'll drop them right there in the show notes for everybody. So Rebecca, thank you so much.
Thank you,
This
Rebecca.
has really been a good conversation.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.